All right, so hi everyone watching to this Hangout, wherein we're going to be doing it a little bit different. We're going to look at like a case study type of thing, where Kim has a story to share in terms of a point that she's looking at and walking in her life right now, where we can just, the three of us, kind of look at it from a Destonian perspective, kind of taking it, applying the principles of taking it back to ourselves and applying common sense and looking at it in a way that's best for all. All right, so hi guys.
Hi.
So let's get started. Maybe Kim, you can share the experience or the pattern that you've been facing.
Okay. So it was a point that came up like in my real-time reality, but it's actually something that had been playing out in my life for some time. And when I was looking at the point, I saw that it actually went back quite far in my life, where I was like really, really shy child, and it really bothered me that I couldn't participate like other kids I was observing in my environment with that enjoyment and expressiveness. So for a long time, I kind of wondered, like, how do you do that? Why can't I do that? And I had been pushing it even before I was walking any kind of process, trying to be more open and expressive. And even I remember I took a drama class because I felt like that would kind of get me out of my shell and really force me to push myself to be comfortable in front of people and expressive, and just kind of push through that, the reactions and the fears or whatever, the social anxieties. And eventually in my life, I found that I was finally able to enjoy this type of interaction. And the specific interaction is more like a group. It's not necessarily one-on-one or a small group. It's like a larger, medium-sized group where, that social anxiety kind of comes up. And I found that through pushing the point, I noticed an enjoyment coming up. And that was really cool, except sometimes I would find that it would only last so long, and then it would kind of run out in a way where it would become effortful, or I would start feeling those old patterns coming back up and just want to withdraw again. So, but I was looking at, so then what was that enjoyment I was experiencing that was cool and that I liked, and was wondering, is it more of a positive energy that I'm creating through interacting with others, or is there some self-honest enjoyment going on? And I realized I wasn't so clear on the difference between the two, or how to identify, what is self-honest enjoyment? Have I ever experienced that? Shouldn't it be easy and just kind of flow? And why can't I experience that flow? There's always, these reactions coming up. And so I kind of have these questions now as to what is it, to enjoy yourself and be comfortable in a group of people.
Cool.
I want to say that it's very cool to even have that question for that starting point there, because most people they go about and they just assume that, okay, everything I experience is real, it's me, it's just fine, there's nothing wrong with it, it's just part of life. So even that question there is really important, because I found for me, always having that question there is how you actually find the truth. You start with the question. So for there, it's like the question of, okay, what is real experience, like what is really me moving myself, enjoying myself, and what is actually just the mind within a reaction, within acting out a pattern, acting out a thought, acting out an experience based off memories of the past, of expectations, or all sorts of things. So I think that's really cool. First of all, is just the question point. I just want to say that first.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's kind of what like walking the destiny process has taught me how to do, is to question what's going on inside of me. And it's cool because I, like with my original story, it kind of was happening with me already, because I could compare myself to what I was seeing in my environment and seeing people enjoying and having fun, and then looking at myself and being like, well, I'm not experiencing that. So why, you know? And yeah, it's a question that, you know, I'm looking at now, and the answer is not coming so clearly.
So I'm wondering, like, what was it that allowed you to, or what was it that allowed that expression to come out? Where you went from being shy or experiencing yourself as more shy or insecure to, you know, allowing yourself to express yourself more. Like, what would you say made that transition possible?
Well, I would say, have you ever heard of the expression fake it till you make it?
Yeah.
So I would kind of mimic the body language, I would try mimicking, but then you can't really fake it, you know, forever. So there were some pushing through walls of fear, and also just getting to know myself and getting to like myself, and being able to express that and put that out there without the fears of judgments, because I was no longer judging myself so much. There was some more self-expression or self-acceptance coming through that I was developing. And that was allowing me to just put myself out there more, whereas before it was like extreme fear if I were to say something and then have like a group of people look at me and I would go all red. So being more stable within myself allowed me to be more expressive and interact more and participate more in groups, and I really liked it. And I think it's really cool, and I would like to work more towards that. But to do so in a self-honest way, not in a way where I feel a draw to do it, like an energetic pull, because I'm getting this positive feedback of like, okay, you know, I'm expressing myself and it feels good, so I want to do it more, or, you know, getting attention now, and kind of reveling in not being just overwhelmed by reactions and judgments and fears. It's an amazing feeling coming from being someone who that was just an impossibility to being able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can also relate to the fake it till you make it point, which for me came up like as I was walking my process, because I've also, especially when I started walking my process, like I had these kind of ideas about how I need to express myself, or like judgments about that kind of positive behavior where I would kind of judge people. Well, I used to always do that in my life, but when I started walking my process, somehow those judgments just kind of became more.
Okay.
And at a certain point, I also had to like realize that those judgments were doing more harm to me, because it's like I was placing myself in a constant state of just insecurity and just feeling bad about myself, and about kind of pushing people away, or, you know, creating so much conflict inside of myself and with the people in my environment, you know, by being like anti everything, almost anti positivity and stuff.
The judgments were towards others or towards yourself?
Well, the judgments was like towards positive behavior, or towards that kind of social, kind of predictable behavior, because, you know, in my mind I thought, well, it's all systematic and it's all pre-programmed, so it's all bad.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to participate in that, and everyone who does is just bad, or is just somehow inferior, you know?
Yeah, kind of like going with social norms and...
Yeah, like judging the social... Like judging the social behavior, because it's apparently all coming from the mind.
Okay, yeah.
Because I was also in that idea of, you know, I can't be the mind, and I want to transcend the mind, so I can't participate in any of those things that I believe is coming from the mind. But so anyway, I realized that, that actually it's not about the behavior, it's more about who I am inside of myself. So doing what's best for myself or supporting myself would actually mean to stop going into conflict and like stop judging all of it, but to just kind of allow myself some space to get to know who I am within it all.
Yeah.
Which also meant, coming back to my point, like, which also meant to kind of fake it till I make it. I mean, like, just kind of going along with social behavior and allowing myself to express that kind of stuff without judgment, just to get to know who I am within it.
Mm-hmm.
And going off, or I want to go off of what Kim just said, or that for me, like, there's a point there of really about developing your own self-expression where that is you and that's real, and there's really that point there where you can express that without like any fear of judgment, any fear of what other people are going to think. Because for me, one point that I walk through a lot is that point of always thinking about what other people are going to think about you, and the fear of that, what they're going to think, what they're going to say, what they're going to judge. And so within that, there's the experience. I've also experienced a point of just positivity within groups. Though for me, the experience I can tell was always superficial because, always the groups would fall away, or there's experience, or it's just, and when I look back, I can see how flimsy they were, you could say. It wasn't like a real standing point. And for me, I noticed how that was because really I was within myself, standing with my expression. And now I can see the difference where when I express me and I stand behind that, I have that stand within myself, then I know that's real because, whether a person is however they're going to respond, I still stand and express myself. And so that's, for me, how I could tell what's more real or not. It's when you're actually challenged, where, let's say you are expressing a certain way, but then someone else comes up to you and they challenge you on that. And then how do you respond to that situation? And you could tell whether it wasn't within energy or not.
Yeah.
Whether you react in anger or you actually fall down in inferiority, however it may be. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to tell. That's a good indicator, which is kind of what I was looking for, is indicators. What is real enjoyment as self-expression, and what is positive energy is kind of playing a role or going after the, energetic experience in a group. And I remember like recently, ever since I started looking at this point, I've been taking that space that Kim was mentioning, and I was in a certain group of people, maybe 7 or 8 people who I am with on a regular basis. And I noticed that I wanted to kind of take that space for myself. So I ended up being quiet because I had been feeling this draw to constantly like speak up and like say a comment and like jump in on the conversation, participate. And when I stopped doing that and I started to just slow down and breathe and listen, which is one of the applications I had given myself to work on, is just kind of hear what people, instead of having so much of the focus on me jumping in and participating, it was more listen, hear what everybody else is saying, and only really speak when I really have something to say. And everybody commented that I was so quiet and it was out of character. And I thought that was funny because, I had always kind of strived to be, when I was faking it till I make it, I had always had like an example, like I would look at others and see how they're expressing themselves to learn how to develop my own self-expression. But what might have happened along the way is that I was too much looking for outside sources for how this works instead of looking internally, and in that almost developing like a social persona, which I feel in some situations is necessary when you go into it in awareness, but had kind of lost myself in what is it to be, in having a good time, experiencing enjoyment in a group, had become more of an image and likeness of it that I had in my mind, rather than an actual real self-expression, which is something that has to be developed.
Right. So it was like already coming from a point of insecurity about yourself, and like believing that somehow you're inferior to other people, and it's like the normal way of expressing yourself is exemplified by other people.
Yeah, like inferiority for sure, and thinking like being quiet and shy is bad and is less than, and being boisterous and expressive is like superior. And then I was even thinking maybe it's okay if I'm quiet in a group and not always jumping in and participating and like making a quip or whatever, and just kind of like maybe just kind of hanging back and observing and listening and speaking, you know, when I really feel I have something to say or really see something that I want to comment on, is not a bad thing, is not, you know, the way I had judged it in myself as being shy and inferior. It's just another way to express, to express myself as quieter.
Yeah. So in a way, it's like you went full circle, but I think that along the way in that circle, you did learn a few things which allowed you now to have like a
yeah. No, definitely, it's like going from one polarity of being with a group of people and just not even speaking at all and just feeling miserable, like, oh my god, everybody's looking at me because I'm not talking and I need to say something, to being like the loudest, you know, most participating individual in the group. So it's like from one polarity to the other, and now looking for that medium, that comfortable kind of natural medium.
Yeah.
What I'm also like, what I'm observing here too is that when there is like, you know, when you're being boisterous or I don't know, like louder, there is that, I mean, that is a part of you, right? That even though that may be within your energy or not, that's still a part of you. And that's still the potential there is for you to live that. Well, obviously when you express yourself in the moment, it's like a decision, it's a movement. So sometimes it will be like quiet because that's how you move yourself, for other times more louder. It's never like one person's always this way, but we do have that tend to like judge, I guess, where we, you know, where you say like, you know, quiet is bad and being talkative is good, which is something that I've also had throughout my life and people have always told me throughout my life. So when we have that judgment there, for me, I found that I got quite blinded, where like I had the same thing with you, where I always think like if I'm quiet then it's bad, or it's bad, just the same experience, emotion coming up, it's bad, and then trying to like, you know, be different. But then within that, you know, just feeling weird and uncomfortable because, you know, I found out it was just because the starting point of already judging is bad. And so if you already have that starting point, then whatever you're going to do is always going to be within that emotion.
Yeah.
So obviously the point is like once you move past that, and then once you're able to stop that and move past that, then you're able to create something that's just you, and whatever it is, you know, it's your creation, then you can stand by that because you created it.
Yeah. Yeah, like we can have a very dynamic expression, you know, be quiet sometimes, be boisterous sometimes, sometimes just be calm and relaxed, and it doesn't have to be one character. Like you guys probably know someone who's like always the funny person that's like kind of performing and entertaining in the group. When I was in my shy stage, I would always look to that type of person and be like, wow, like how do they do that? They're so comfortable. Like for me, if I say something and then I'm going to go red, and then if I go red, that's just, I'm going to want to disappear and like leave. And seeing that as just like, you know, the way to be. But like Yogan says, you can be like that sometimes, you know, as an expression of part of yourself in that moment. And in other moments be quiet and, you know, just have a whole spectrum of expression.
I wanted to say too how when you say like, oh, you know, there's that one guy who's like this, you know, or one girl like this, that, you know, most people just have like one or two, or you know, it's like such a limited range of expression. That's because that's all they have. That's all they lived. Only that one expression or whatever, one personality throughout their life. So, or like social situations.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like so limited. You know, that's one thing always about within Destiny, where it's about the point of, you know, how we're always limited as human beings, limited within the mind. And if we were like, say, unlimited, we actually had full range of expression. That's what I've always seen like as that goal there of like actually like be able to express yourself, however, not really being limited by your emotions, feelings, by what you believe is possible or not possible, what you believe is right or wrong. But yeah.
And now when I see that type of expression, you know, the person who's the comedian, the entertainer, I can like I found myself judging that now as like, oh, you know, like they're in the spotlight, they want the spotlight on them. And then when I'm doing it, I recognize like, okay, you're being the entertainer, you're wanting the spotlight on you, maybe slow down a little bit. And I feel like an indicator is the draw, the pull, or the desire to speak, where there's like an outside source that is pulling you to speak, and then you'll get like a good feeling or whatever, versus like an internal kind of impulse or realization where you're speaking from that. And it's true that whenever I've spoken from the internal realization starting point, it doesn't even matter how anybody reacts to me. I won't be embarrassed, I won't go red, I'll just be very certain in what I'm saying, and it actually, the conversation flows. Whereas if it's coming from like an entertainer, kind of comedian or whatever, social butterfly type character, that there's effort that has to be put in, and it's almost draining in a way. Like sometimes I would come back from a party or a social event and just feel absolutely drained because I had to sustain and maintain this performance and this energy.
There's one thing that you said within there, where it's almost like I saw like the word like ego in a way, because when it's that point of the mind where when you express within like the mind's like always about me, like the mind, like my experience, like me having that tension, right? And that's one thing I noticed too with expression. That's when you're really expressing yourself, is that you have to realize that when you're involving the other person, and when a person's there, you're communicating with them, you know, they're there. So you can't only consider only yourself. At the very least, you have to always consider them, and in a way almost prioritize them, because you're putting them in your space. You're, with whatever you're communicating, you know, you're communicating to them, like they're part of that. And so for me, that always saw as a point of responsibility where you have to include the other person within what you're saying, what you're doing, your expression. And almost in a way, because when you're by yourself, you can, you know, express yourself however you want. You know, no one's there. You know, it's like there's like you have to consider another person, but when a person's there, it's like it's almost the way when you communicate, express. It's like almost for them in a way, because you know they're there. They're going to be listening to you. So, for example, when you do entertainment, you are considering them. Like, are they being entertained? You're trying to like make a joke, and it is a way for them. You know. But if you know you're really laughing at inside for yourself when it's actually your point anyway. So whether they're laughing or not, you know, it's still for you. But you're doing it as a sharing for them. You know, it's like that's what I see there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was also seeing a similar point, like how like when we're in a personality, like a social personality, there's always like a separation there, which is the feelings and the emotions, where it's like every person has a different way of dealing with their emotions by going into some kind of social personality, where you're either an entertainer or you're the shy one, or you're the one sitting in the back, or you're, I don't know, there's so many different ways in which that people deal with their own, like, I suppose, fears, because we're all like in some way or form afraid of each other, which makes us go into these kind of personalities as our ways of in which we learn to deal with our environment and kind of circumvent our fears. So, but it's like Yogan said, like when you're just expressing yourself, there's a comfort, and that comfort comes from like not being afraid of people, because you're aware that people are just like you. Like they're here and you're here, and it's like you're just talking to yourself in a way. And I mean, what I found is that that awareness does assist with being more comfortable, where you just kind of drop all your judgments that you have of people, and you see another as yourself, as your equal. And within that seeing, it's like you can speak to them directly, and you can feel comfortable in saying whatever it is that you want to say in that moment, because it's like it's coming from you, for you, as another, as yourself.
Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate a little bit on, you were saying we all fear each other?
Well, it's like, if you have a look at the personalities, there's always like these set personalities, like you mentioned, the comedian, the entertainer, the shy one, what else is there? Like, I don't know, the weird one, or there's all like these set personalities that we can all recognize, and that it almost seems like in every scenario you have those personalities come up with the different people in the group. So it's almost like a pre-programmed kind of thing. And, that's just because we, throughout our lives, it's like we individually develop our own ways of dealing with the fears, or the kind of the feedback that we've been getting from our environment in terms of what is good behavior, what is bad behavior. And that kind of all comes down to a fear of, I don't know, like being punished, being rejected, somehow a fear of punishment, or a fear of fear itself. And yeah, like for instance, with you and with me as well, I'm not sure how it was for Yogan, but like we developed that kind of shyness personality, or insecurity personality, of just kind of withdrawing inside of ourselves, where that's kind of been our way of seeking comfort and dealing with our fears of our environment.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's within all these personalities that we then also develop like judgments of each other as we react to other people's personalities. And it's like basically reacting to other parts of ourselves, that we've suppressed inside of ourselves. Like for me, I was in a lot of judgments to other people, especially people who were boisterous and very loud and very like extroverted, because that's the stuff that I've been suppressing inside of myself. So I was judging that, not realizing that it was a part of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only once I was able to drop the judgment that also I was able to drop the fear and, realize that comfort that exists in seeing another as myself, and, rather than judging their expression.
Right. For me, I also see a fear of being exposed,
How so?
Like just a fear of maybe somebody seeing if I have this confident facade that really underneath there's an insecurity. And to say something or step out of line and then have everybody all of a sudden realize that, I am faking it, or I am not as confident as I may appear, or, there's something inside of me that I'm hiding that I don't want everybody to know. And if I say the wrong thing or end up in this kind of conversation, it might come out. And then, it is totally an ego thing. Like Yogan had mentioned ego. And then that ego, which is not real, is all of a sudden exposed. And now, your secrets are out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's also in a way based on a fear of being seen as weak,
Mm-hmm.
which is then based on fear of being rejected somehow. So from my perspective, it's all based on fears that we have, like that we carry around with us since childhood, as we learn that certain behavior is not acceptable, or like you need to behave in a certain way to avoid being bullied or targeted in some way.
Yeah, it's really amazing all the stuff that's going on internally in social interactions and groups, and it's going on in each and every person. And imagine that every person in the group just accepted each other for being, you know, perhaps a flawed person working on themselves, trying to build themselves, their weaknesses, you know, working towards qualities where we would be able to kind of give each other a break a bit and realize that everything that everybody else is going through, we're also going through within ourselves. So not to judge it, and how much expression and how much more of the individual could come through than if that were the dynamic in a group. And maybe we could even contribute to developing that dynamic in a group if we ourselves are expressing from that starting point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's like, you know, within Destiny, where the discussion that we're having right now, it's like we're each walking our own process, and we're each standing in that point of self-responsibility where, you know, it's about ourselves and the process that we're walking inside of ourselves. So it's like if each person is standing in that self-responsibility, then there's not going to be those kind of conflicts or war in terms of judgments, you know, reactions going on between individuals, where you then get personalities, where you then get, you know, separation and just people trying to cope with their own fears and emotions and stuff as we try to kind of protect ourselves from each other and ourselves.
Yeah, that awareness is really cool. And the self-acceptance that's developed from it, because I find the more I accept myself, the more I'm able to accept and stop judging others. And then it kind of works, you know, in a roundabout way where you are more gentle on yourself and then more gentle on others. Like if I see someone else get all red in the face now, I'm going to be like, I know what that feels like, you know, and like be more gentle. Whereas somebody who's in a character might then kind of go into an attack on that person and use them to, you know, elevate themselves and use them as the butt of a joke or whatever because they see a weakness. And instead of standing with that person and supporting them, they'll go with that weakness and use it for their own benefit in social situations.
Yeah, and it's always about how we are in relation to ourselves, how we react to others. Like the person who sees the getting red in the cheeks as a weakness is also someone who sees that in themselves, who maybe suppresses their own weaknesses and hides a lot of themselves that they perceive or judge to be weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
So how they would react or respond to another person who is expressing that point is one and equal with how they are in relation to themselves.
Yeah, I remember times where I would be visibly embarrassed, and then the confident kind of confident person, clown, entertainer would then focus in on me, and it would be like dying in myself because now everybody's looking at me and like it's. And then I noticed that now I can kind of breathe through it. When I go red in the face or whatever, I have a reaction. Still affects me, but I see that it's kind of like another feedback where if you can check your starting point, because if you have a reaction and then it just continues, you can know that your starting point was based in positive energy. Whereas if you were speaking from a point of self-honesty, likely the reaction is either not going to happen or you're going to be able to breathe through it and kind of move on instead of just falling into more and more reactions and not wanting to be there and having, you know, that outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing that I found with working with like the positive energies and like developing expressions is how it's just like working with emotions. Like you see the reaction and then you ask yourself, okay, like who do I want to be in this moment? What do I want to express? You know, and then you move and you express that. And it's really your own creation, no matter what it is, whether it's making a joke or, I don't know, sharing something you see, whatever it may be. And it's really just that simple. And, you know, when I find myself having a reaction, all I do is just, okay, well, I have reacted. Now what? You know, it's always about like real time. Okay, see what I realize now. Okay, what do I do with that? And that's always a question. Like, you may react, but that's okay. Then you just be aware of it. Then you just decide what you want to do next. You know, how you're gonna express, or see you reveal some deeper pattern possibly, or like some like long pattern. Like one pattern is probably relevant for every single person is when it comes to relationships and attraction. Because for me, like when it came to the positive, the loud, talkative person, has always seen something very attractive for me. Which of course, if we look at attraction, what does it really signify? Something that you want for yourself. So for me, like I was attracted to someone very talkative, so I wanted to be very talkative. So that was it's a very clear indication. And that's something that most people can probably do right away. It's really in your face, because you always know, like, oh, your perfect partner, or what you're attracted to, what you want. And then from there, you can really easily source words. And, you know, and within a group context too, it's still the same points, no matter the. So I was saying that how when it comes to expressing yourself with another person, whether it's like within that partner context or within a group context of friends, or even just when it's with yourself, it's still that point of a living word that you're expressing. And so that's what's real, and that's what's stable within all of that. And so could be certain reactions though in certain contexts because of the programming involved. Though your expression there, when it's something real, it's there and you can see it, and something that's really personal to you. It's not like dependent on the outside environments or anything, because it's your expression.
Do you have a word that you use in this context?
Sometimes I don't use words. Other times I use words. The times where I don't use words, it's just because I already developed it, and it's kind of just almost natural in a way. Words can help define it, especially when I'm communicating with another person. But like, for example, I know like when I'm making a joke, or when I'm like giggling or laughing, it's just something I naturally do. And just something I just express. Other times when I'm like really serious, I get really serious, especially when it comes to like the mind, when it comes to something that's really serious, where when it needs direction. For example, it needs like a direction to go a certain way or that certain way. And then I speak that certain way or act a certain way, which is the same thing I would do for myself. So if it involves another person, it's just how it's expressed. So those are two examples. Yeah.
You didn't give a word.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could use many words. Like, like the word I was using was direction.
Okay.
I just sort of just speaking it, or when I'm joking around, joking. So yeah, whatever it needs is almost like that's the word. Like, if it needs direction, then I'm being the director. I'm directing it, direction. Yeah.
Kim,
Also,
sorry.
serious. Hmm?
Sorry.
Sorry.
I thought you were done.
No, I was just saying like serious is another word.
Oh, serious.
Yeah.
So maybe we can just shortly look at words that you can live, Kim, in those moments where you go into the positive feelings, because it's usually probably only afterwards, when the exhaustion and stuff comes up, that you realize that you've gone into a mind point.
Yeah, well, I can even identify it sometimes in real time. It's uncomfortable. So one of the words I've been playing with is comfortable, and another one is natural.
Okay, and how has that been working so far?
It's just new. I found it difficult. Hence why I brought up the point, because it's not been coming easy. But I would just try to, with comfortable, it's a physical point I would apply, where once I feel that discomfort coming, I just breathe and relax my whole body, slow down, and look for just settling into my body and finding that comfort there, which grounds me, brings me out of the mind and into the physical, and that's very helpful. Natural was just like Yogan was saying, like, who am I in this situation, in this context, and bringing me back to myself and in how I've gotten to know myself through the process, and make sure that that's what I'm expressing.
for me too, when I look back over when I work with words or work with expressions, I really started with things I already done throughout my life. Like maybe it was when I was a little kid, or during school times, during times of my life, or even when I'm just by myself, or with certain like family members. You know, it's like specific people, like people you know you can be close to, like you know brothers or cousins or sisters or whoever. Like just certain moments where you know you express a certain way, and sort of like take those expressions into your everyday life, and something that I found effective too. Like with joking, for example, I would only do joking in certain situations. And also just see like maybe what words come up within you when you are comfortable, you know, like how you talk, like even like when you are expressing with these groups of people, like see what words you actually are living, or that you can actually then take and like refine or just somehow live like physically, you know, something like that's really yours.
Yeah, that's really cool. And like even with walking process, doing the writing and the self-investigation, I've noticed that it's come a long way from where I was, and now it's not a completely, you know, terrible experience or anything, but I'm looking to refine and perfect and really just strengthen, you know, there's like a lot of words that I'm already living that it's a good suggestion that you made to remember those in those moments.
Yeah. And yes, as you're living the words, it might also be a good idea to simultaneously, because like if you find yourself stuck, or if you find that it's not going very smoothly, then maybe it's also that there are still points of like fears, or there are still like these hidden motivation points for the energy that you haven't yet seen or walked through. So as long as that's there, from my perspective, it would be like very difficult to live a word, because it's almost like you're kind of forcing yourself into living the word while there's still these points kind of gnawing at you on the inside. That's what I experience, at least, with when it comes to living words. It's like simultaneously I also have to kind of walk my process with investigating those deeper hidden points that are there, like fears, you know. When usually it's like points of fear that I'd still be dealing with and that I'd still have to react, because then still have to correct, not react. So because once you're able to see the fears or see the points, whatever reactions are still there, then you can also apply living words to that, you know, so you become more and more specific as you see the actual reactions that come up from those deeper layers.
Something too I was just thinking about, like the toughest times I face within my expressions, or toughest times where I face social situations, is really those times where people are like literally like insulting you or like talking bad about you, or you know, when you express a certain way. And then in those moments when you're able to still stand by yourself and know who you are, know your expression, because that's really been the challenge for me too, is where, because you know people challenge you about who you are and your expression, and I mean that's kind of like the point, like who are you within that, like what is actually you, like are you just going to bend over and change just because someone's insulting you or telling you a certain way like that? And it's that kind of embrace of yourself where that's being real and really you enjoying yourself, where you know that this is you and that's real, and just this, that kind of like acceptance where you investigate yourself, you test yourself, whether you react or not. So then you're able to trust that point. And so then you just express yourself. And, that's a whole process to walk where, there's plenty of emotions, there's plenty of hidden motivations, like Kim was saying, for about the intentions and fears or insecurities, like lifelong patterns. So, working all that, it's all some simultaneous process, working through all that and also developing your expression. You're doing that all the same time.
Yeah.
So are there any more like points that you'd like to discuss, Kim, in relation to, you know, this point that you've been walking? Like, are there any more dimensions of it that are like still unclear, or that you'd like to just open up in the discussion today? Or
I feel like I got some really good feedback. I really like the indicators, real-time indicators of being able to identify when it's when I go up into my mind and seek the positive energy versus when I'm just expressing myself as who I am, and also checking the starting point of expressing in group situations, which I think are two really important pieces for me. And also, like you said, Kim, about investigating the fears that may still be there, that just repeated patterns that have been there for a long time, that I think writing is like the tool I would use to look at those and take them apart, and just really applying from here now, looking at this point in my life, applying myself with the feedback from you guys and what I get from myself, from my own writing and self-investigation, and to go forward and just, you know, you just have to live it at some point in real time and make it who you are.
yeah, well said. Yogan, do you have anything left to share?
No, I think it's really nice that Kim K opened up this point for us to look at, for everyone to look at, because it's definitely something that's difficult to work through, is all these points within people, relationships, social things.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like it. It's something new, and it's challenging all of us to, in the moment, look at this point and also place ourselves in her shoes, or in the person's shoes who's dealing with the issue, and, you know, really apply the principles and the tools. So I like it. So we may do more of those in the future.
Cool.
Okay, so then I suppose we can wrap it up. All right.
Yeah, thank you guys both for your feedback and for talking about this with me.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for being here and sharing your story. That's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.